Oi oi, it's another slice of lies, damn lies and history, and today I will be debunking a meme. Yes, a meme. Now, taking on a meme might seem a little pointless, and it kind of is, but it also gets kind of meta, so watch to the end. Now, the meme in question had been pretty popular during the early part of this whole coronavirus outbreak thing, and is some variant or other of, hey, Shakespeare wrote King Lear while he was in quarantine, so you should be able to do some awesome stuff too, or some vaguely similar collection of words to that effect. Now, the meme itself is a harmless and indeed potentially uplifting exhortation towards positive creativity for those undergoing isolation and quarantine, in order to distract themselves from the remorseless brutality of their current situation. So I mean this video as no attack upon the creators of the post, or indeed those who shared it. But this series is about correcting popularly believed false historical narratives, so here we go. Did Shakespeare actually write King Lear while in quarantine? Well, let's take a look. King Lear was a tragedy written by Shakespeare in 1605 or 1606. Now this itself raises an issue, because if he started it in 1605 then he wouldn't have been under quarantine because nobody was. Whereas if he started it the following year, then that would at least have coincided with the 1606 outbreak of bubonic plague in London, which was thankfully a great deal less severe than the one 3 years prior. But regardless, we simply don't know exactly when he started writing it because details of his life are pretty sketchy at best. However, this ambiguity alone renders the idea of stating with authority the idea that isolation afforded him the time to write the piece as misleading and silly. But then again, it is just a meme, I suppose. Anyways, let us continue. Now for a moment, let's go with the idea that he definitely only wrote it in 1606, and only started doing so in late spring when the outbreak actually began. Because yes, the early part of that year saw no plague, but it did actually see some deaths, namely those of Guy Fawkes and his co-conspirators at the gallows. 1606 was certainly an interesting year in London, if nothing else. So yes, let's say Shakespeare writes King Lear in spring to autumn of 1606. Well, that would mean that for most of the time he still wouldn't have been under quarantine, because the plague outbreak didn't reach the area in which he lived, which was St Olave's parish in Southwark, central London, until the autumn of that year, meaning that he still must have started writing it before he could possibly have been in isolation, because there was never a blanket quarantine order across the capital. It was always done on a house-by-house basis. If you or a cohabiting family member got the disease, they would simply paint a red cross on your door to alert neighbours and passers-by that the house was to be avoided, quite literally, like the plague, and everyone living there would have to stay inside until they were either A, all dead, or B, whoever remained alive was no longer showing any symptoms of the disease. So that moves our proposed starting point for writing King Lear to autumn of 1606, which would be frankly impossible because we know from records that King Lear was performed for the first time in a private viewing by the King of England, James I, on Boxing Day, the 24th of December 1606, meaning Shakespeare simply must have started writing it before the autumn, before the plague had reached his area of the city. Now, none of this is to say that Shakespeare's life and work was unaffected by the plague. Indeed, in the years 1606 to 1613, when it was eventually burned down, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre was closed roughly half of that time due to the plague ordinances, which were official restrictions on public gatherings. And indeed the Shakespeare household was touched by the plague, with William's landlady, Mary Mountjoy, succumbing to the dreadful disease on August the 30th of 1606. But shortly after this, the Shakespeares would leave the city for a few weeks, meaning that if they ever were under any quarantine, it was only for a very brief period, certainly nowhere near long enough to write an entire play in. So to answer the titular question, did William Shakespeare write King Lear whilst in quarantine? No, he didn't. But like I said, it's just a meme aimed at inspiring positive creativity in order to divert from the grim realities of the current situation. And this video has been my creative endeavour to that effect, so although the meme is historically inaccurate, it actually worked. And maybe that's the bigger point.